Today we're going to talk about insanely affordable vintage receivers that the audiophile vintage snobs ignore. It's going to be a super fun video. Vintage audio is crazy expensive. Actually, I just did a video about it called The Ugly Truth About Vintage Audio. It's done really well, and basically I tell you not to buy vintage audio. So why am I giving you advice about some vintage audio deals that you can find? Well, because I know most people are going to ignore me, and let's face it, it's super cool to have a vintage receiver. So if you want to dip your toe into that vintage audio pool and not pay $1,000 for that perfect Pioneer just to have to go into the shop a month later, then this is the video that you should watch. Because there's a bunch of hidden gems out there if you just look hard enough. And because these vintage audio snobs ignore them, then you're the one that gets to benefit from it. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, maybe the new Cam Coffee Club flavor Nicaraguan Death Punch. You can also get this free coffee mug. Okay, quick disclaimer. Not all of these are going to be available everywhere. And if you buy them, they're going to be in varying condition. Most people don't offer a warranty. The prices I'm going to talk about are from eBay, which I basically told you not to buy a vintage receiver from. However, some of these are less than $200. And at that price, well, you're more likely to take a risk and not resent it later. If you're buying it in person, make sure it turns on. Or if you're meeting someone in the parking lot, bring an AC converter, hook some speakers up to it, and see if you can get both channels to work with FM radio. And just be prepared that if you do get it, it breaks down and you want to get it repaired, be ready for some sticker shock. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about them. Most people consider the golden age of vintage audio receivers to be somewhere between the late 60s to the early 80s. Now, these are kind of ugly ducklings, and they're not going to be for everyone. But I think you should consider them because they're huge deals. And it's the early 80s Realistic XTA 2000 series. There's a few to choose from. Many of you probably already know that Realistic was Radio Shack's house brand. The thing to think about though is that most of these receivers were built by Japanese OEMs. Some people think that Realistic was just a rebadged Pioneer. That's not true. However, there was a lot of part sharing between Pioneer receivers and Realistic receivers. And even the monster receivers that Realistic put out at the end are going for well over $1,000, sometimes north of $2,000. So that should tell you that these pieces are pretty good, but you don't have to buy those pieces. This was the transition between really purely analog Silverface to some digital stuff. And because there's some digital stuff on there, people don't like them. This is my Realistic STA 2070, I think. This is from 1986. And it's still pretty heavy. And it's still made in Japan. These can be regularly found on eBay or in Goodwills. Actually, one of my patrons, Dan, sent this to me from, well, the beautiful Pacific Northwest. He found it at a Goodwill, and I think he paid 20 bucks for it, maybe 30. I had another model very similar to this, but when I got this one in from Dan, well, I got rid of the other one because this one has emotional value to it because it's from a friend. Oh my goodness. One of the best things about this is it has mid-range controls and loudness control and 2 phono stages and digital VU meters and a really terrible power cord. But to be fair, even expensive Pioneers and Marances had really terrible power cords. This also has a stereo enhancer, which don't use because it makes it sound terrible. But the cool thing about this receiver is it still has a little bit of those 70s vintage vibes. And then Skynet T1000 Qs too. It's fun. People think they're ugly though, and that's why you can get them for $200. Now listen, I probably wouldn't spend $2,000 on a receiver on eBay, but I would spend $150 or $250. You want to look for STA 2000, whatever it is. They do have an STA 2300, and I believe that's the monster receiver, and they're selling it for $1,500 right now. Rated at 120 watts per channel, and this guy says he bench tested it at 138 watts. So this guy may be somebody to buy from, because it sounds like they actually know what they're selling. Anyway, that's not the one I wanted to talk about. Sorry, I get a little bit sidetracked sometimes. The STA 2280 is coming in at $179 for its buy it now price. This was actually a late 80s model from 87 to 88, rated at 60 watts. So these realistic receivers are out there. They're in the 80s though, so bear in mind, if something goes wrong with them, well, most of them probably aren't repairable. However, you're going to be spending the same amount on some type of import Chinese amplifier, which, guess what, isn't repairable either. So if you want to have fun, if you want to listen to something with a little bit of personality and have something that's interesting to look at while you're listening, check out a realistic STA 2000 series, because for $200, I think you're going to have a lot of fun. And if and when it fails, well, at least you enjoyed it for a while. The Pioneer SX3700. This is a very interesting piece. It actually lives at one of my patrons now. I owned it for a while. Sounds great, but I had too many vintage receivers. Comes from 1980, which is a really interesting year for Pioneer. This was released the same year I think 100% digital amplifier or receiver came out from Pioneer. So you have something that looks like a Cutlass Supreme, and then something that looks like the terrible Dodge Challengers from the early 80s. It was a complete and utter shift. To me, the Pioneer SX3700 is the last. That's the last silver-faced receiver. Even though there's a digital VU meter, a digital tuner on it, it still has holdovers from the 1970s era. It sounds fantastic though, and I think if you can find this thing under $300, I think it's totally worth it, because it does really look cool. I just looked at eBay. There's one available for $525 and one available for $730. So there is one available for $199. So it looks like some people are getting savvy to it. Actually, there's one for $275. A ton of them on eBay right now. Anyway, check it out. They sound fantastic, but as far as the repairability goes, you're probably in the same boat as you are with some of the realistic. This coming from 1980 though, you may have a better chance of getting it repaired, but it really is a spectacular sounding, and in my opinion, a spectacular looking and also historically significant Pioneer receiver. Don't sleep on the Kenwood stuff either. I know Kenwood was a bit of a B or C tier brand back in the 70s and early 80s, 90s, and there's a reason probably why they don't make stuff anymore. Anyway, some of the stuff is really cool. I have a Model 9G, I believe, and it was actually a gift from our buddy Lenny Florentine, and it's a beautiful piece. The problem is it's comically large and doesn't fit in any rack. It's 24 or 26 inches wide. It's so big, you can't put it in a regular rack. But this thing is amazing. Now, these are going to be very expensive, okay? But there are examples of other Kenwood products out there, receivers that are fairly affordable. And if you're wanting to try to get into vintage audio without taking a big risk, take a look at some Kenwood stuff. Just make sure you do your homework. Kenwood's pretty solid. Check out the lower powered Yamaha stuff. The CR400, I think is 16 watts, maybe 12 watts a channel. Remember, those watts were different. Vintage watts are more powerful than modern watts. I don't know why, that's just been my experience. The CR400 is coming from 1977. I have a CR800 and I love it. It's great. It does have a bit of a different sound though, and that sound is a little bit cleaner. I mean, they call it what, natural sound or something like that. But those lower powered Yamahas, even from the 70s, which are going to be more serviceable than some of these early to mid 80s receivers I've been talking about. There's a CR800, which is the same one that I have for $450 or best offer. So do your own research, but don't be scared away by 12 or 16 watts. You'll be surprised at what that can drive. And it's probably cheaper than the tube amp you're looking at. I think the biggest takeaway about this video is that number one, there are brands out there from the 70s that may not have been the most desirable, but like Realistic, Kenwood, and some other ones. By the way, if you know of any B, C tier vintage brands from the 70s, put it in the comments. What are the best values in vintage audio in your opinion? Bear in mind, these may not last. I think when we look at it from the perspective of we're going to be paying the same or maybe even more money from something that's direct from China, how big of a risk is it really? Because that thing could die tomorrow too. What's your advice on someone that wants to get into vintage audio? What should they be looking at? What are your favorite models that don't cost an arm and a leg today? Before you buy, please watch this other video I just put up about the ugly truth about vintage audio that no one is talking about. I'll put it right here or here. If you love coffee as much as I do, then you need to check out Cam Coffee. We have a Cam Coffee Club. You get a new flavor each month that is freshly roasted. This month is Nicaraguan Death Punch. Link in the description. Thank you so much for watching.